Hi Booktube, Aaron here, hope you're doing okay. Today I've got a bit of a discussion video. It's not really something I do a lot of over here. I don't really react too much to other people's videos, and this isn't a contentious, drama-fueled video by any means. It's more of grappling with an issue that popped from my head while I was watching someone else's video. And it's just an interesting question. It's not not anything scary. But I was watching a video earlier today by Mark from Book Time with Elvis, and he's been doing a lot of, I suppose, reflecting on his reading recently, looking at the number of female authors he reads in comparison to the number of male authors he reads and stuff like that. So I'll have the video that I watched down in the description. Even though it does have quite a contentious clickbaity title, but he's looking into the number of male authors he reads compared to female authors, and sort of comparing statistics, looking at the periods he likes to read, and then maybe comparing that to publishing today and the number of women publishing compared to sort of males and other. Just sort of bringing up that question why he reads, and what is it that he enjoys reading, and can he be more aware about what he reads. But really for me, the main question that was popping in my head as I was watching it, even though it wasn't really the main issue for Mark, was why do we read? And we've had a few of these sort of videos and issues that are sort of skirting around this, this year, like earlier this year we had the whole discussion about book critics and criticism, and do we need them, and do we even need books? And so I'll have some of those videos down below. So I think this is kind of adjacent to that, but yeah, just trying to look into the core issue of why do we read. And for me, I do have a main answer that I tend to throw up quite quickly. But as I was thinking more about this, and I was thinking more about the poetry I read, because I find that a quicker, easier way to kind of get to the bottom of my reading life, and realising that maybe the main reason I give for reading isn't really that accurate. So I'm going to tell a bit of a story. I hope I don't ramble on for too long, and hopefully it'll kind of circle back round to this question of why do we read. And so the little story is about, it's not really much of a story, it's just down to the fact that I used to subscribe to Poetry magazine, which is a monthly poetry journal from Chicago, and they really pride themselves to be, sort of a experimental sort of spearhead sort of publication, sort of publishing the best or the most original contemporary poetry. And a lot of it's really fun. There are lots of really great poets that I discovered through the time I spent subscribed to this. And although the main reason that I stopped my subscription was mainly just to do with the way COVID affected, the whole lockdown situation affected the way I was experiencing time, and I wasn't really keeping up with these subscriptions, so I stopped them after a while. But there was maybe another reason at the back of my head, and that was because for all the great poetry I was reading, there was also a lot of poetry that was annoying me, and I wasn't appreciating as much. And the main thing that really kind of annoyed me, and it's the kind of poetry I tend to avoid sort of 99% of the time in my reading, is poetry with this sort of memoir kind of feel and approach to it. And I use the word memoir instead of sort of autobiographical, because most poetry has autobiographical elements to it to certain degrees, but with a memoir, it tends to have like a core issue, a core question, a core struggle, and it's then using life events to address that question or that kind of thesis. And I was feeling more and more that that was what was going on, and that people kind of using whether it's struggle or anything else as a kind of a way to make the poem feel a little more important, which isn't necessarily to say that these poems aren't important. It's just not necessarily that what I look for in poetry, and after a while it started to annoy me just because that wasn't what I was looking for. And the reason I'm bringing this up is not not necessarily to show that I'm a horrible person, but it's because the main reason I always give for reading is that I want to read for empathy, to feel a connection, either with the author or with like a character, or with something in the literature that I'm reading. And if you're kind of taking that at face value, you would expect that I would gravitate towards memoir and towards poetry with this kind of memoir-esque approach. And yet I really don't. I actually, every now and then I might read a collection of poetry that has that kind of approach to it, and it might impress me every now and then. There are actually a couple of collections I've read this year, these are recent collections that I really loved, that were kind of like that. And yet there's a lot that I tend to avoid, and I don't read that many memoirs. I just think it's interesting. If I say I read for empathy, why don't I gravitate towards that? And I don't have an answer. I just thought it was a really, really interesting question. But then to kind of counterbalance that, I thought I'd bring up a poet I love, and that's W.B. Yeats. And he's one of these sort of classic poets that probably a lot of people, when they're interested in poetry, or if they're studying poetry as part of a literature course or something, they're probably going to get around to Yeats eventually. And I just I discovered him in a classroom when I was 17 years old. And he was one of those poets where we've got the probably his most famous poem, the Second Coming, up here, and it's a poem that fits on a single page, and it's this box, and there's a part of me that likes the fact that this poem is just this box on a page that I can play around with. But what I particularly love about Yeats in particular is the fact that I suppose that there are some people that really love reading a poet or a poem, and it's kind of like a puzzle, and they want to unpack everything they can out of it, and it's not necessarily the best way to read poetry, and it's definitely not the best way to read Yeats, because with Yeats, I mean, I don't really know how you could kind of try and make sense of what he's going on about, because it's so symbolic and esoteric. Particularly something like the Second Coming. But to circle that around as well to this, why do I read? Is it for empathy? Sort of question. Even though I'm not solving the puzzle, I might be spending some time paying some closer attention to a certain line. So maybe it's something like maybe the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And I could be like, well, I might not know exactly what he means or what his intentions are there. I might not know the exact context that he's trying to connect this to, but at the same time, it doesn't matter, because even if I don't know, I feel what it means, and it's the same for, lines like this, the centre cannot hold, and all that weird stuff. And then, in even weird lines like, hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. And what is he really meaning with this imagery? And you know, if you were the type to try and put that puzzle together, you know, maybe you might get, you know, sort of a theory or an idea, and yet it kind of makes you feel something, and you know, part of it is fear and confusion, and I think that's totally what Yeats is trying to conjure in this poem. This idea of things being turned up and being confused, and all this fear. And I suppose in a way that is a kind of empathy, and it's a different kind of empathy. It's less direct. It's not necessarily the face value empathy that you'd initially expect. And so, yeah, no clear answers here. I'm just rambling, but I find it cool to see that the first answer that I give isn't as simple as I think it is, and maybe a question like, why do I read? The more I look into it, the more questions I'm going to find. So there we go. I'll leave it there. I hope I haven't rambled on too long. But thank you for watching if you've made it this far, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.